What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Well, last week, Nintendo is doing what Nintendo does best, and that's issue takedowns for all kinds of stuff online. This, though, shouldn't be that surprising, but it does make me think Nintendo is going to be in this one for the long haul, not only with the Switch 1, but also for the Switch 2, and we'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about a new patent from Sony that seems to target long download times or the ability to jump into games quickly, and this has some people concerned about the future and preservation for games. And we actually have some Switch games that have gone on sale, which we'll take a look at. And then finally, I wanted to put a spotlight on a legendary figure for gaming that's really provided a ton of innovation and unfortunately has passed away. But we'll look at some of their contributions, which, yes, comes back to, of course, the Dreamcast. All that and more. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button. Helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. Guys, we're every weekday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, keeping you up to date in the world of gaming. So even if you don't get a notification in the morning, just know there's probably a video here for you. We're going to start today with an incredible crossover, and I'm glad that we got the entire epic looking video and stuff for it to set up what is a new season for Rainbow Six Siege. But again, a really cool crossover, and you can see the trailer and the video they put out here. And this is indeed for Snake. So Solid Snake is going into Rainbow Six Siege with this latest season that will be starting on March 3rd. And we can see here the iconic Solid Snake operator arrives in Rainbow Six Siege with Operation Silent Hunt. Now, this is a full operator, so Snake will not be a skin for an already existing operator. And look, it's just cool to see Solid Snake, and you see Sam Fisher, so we got Splinter Cell crossing over with Metal Gear Solid. And look, that would have been my mind would have been blown as a 16-year-old seeing this back in like the mid to early 2000s. Just incredible stuff here. So I'm really glad they went all out here with the introduction for it. And while I'm not really big into Rainbow Six Siege at this time, it does seem like something that would be legitimately exciting if you've been playing it this whole time. So I guess in that case, check this one out at the beginning of March. Also, we had some interesting news here when it comes to the side of Mac and gaming, which isn't typically something that goes together consistently. There's some pretty cool versions of Mac games that do some really, impressive stuff on some of those newer M series chips. But mostly it's been spotty when it comes to support. Well, we can see, now this is from GameSir, says your Mac is now a gaming PC, introducing Game Hub for Mac. Unlock your entire Steam library. That's coming soon. And this is something I see pop up a lot online for Android, where you can emulate a lot of the PC games and Steam on all kinds of Android devices. And it is legitimately impressive. Some of the performance that people get out of these lower power chips and these Android devices. So I guess them targeting Mac, it makes sense, again, just based on what they've been able to do when it comes to the Android side. And at this time, Mac, again, you're usually unsure as to if a game is going to work on it or not, but you do know it's probably going to be working on Windows and PC and Steam and stuff. So here, having some sort of way to emulate or do a translation layer, and it seems like they have quite a few features planned for it. So something to keep an eye on here to see how all of this turns out. And yeah, maybe then Mac can really get involved with just PC gaming across the board. Oh, and I feel like I should point this out. The Zelda 40th anniversary is indeed this Saturday, and there have been a lot of questions as to if Nintendo is going to do anything for that anniversary this week. And I don't think so at all, really. And it's unfortunate because massive property, obviously, for Nintendo, but one that many people grew up with, have a ton of nostalgia, and would like to see some sort of celebration for this franchise on its 40th anniversary. I think in this case, maybe Nintendo puts out a message on social media or something, or just ignore it until they're ready to officially do a lot of merchandise, yes, but be able to do a full celebration. I think that will happen sometime this year. Game releases, merchandise, more LEGO collaborations, I'm sure, all kinds of stuff that they can, sell you and make money. But unfortunately, I don't think that's going to be happening this week when it officially ticks over for that 40th anniversary on Saturday. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Nintendo doing what Nintendo does and issue DMCA takedowns. Basically all over the place. They just shotgun blasted tons of these things out towards GitHub. And what's on GitHub? a bunch of emulators, and here that would be for the Switch. Now, I first saw this that was noted over on Android Authority saying the notice was sent yesterday, and it includes Eden, Citron, Kenji NX, and Mellow NX, as well as projects that are no longer active, such as Sudachi and Skyline. As of writing, the repositories are still online, but it likely won't be long before they are removed from the website. Okay, so first off, with GitHub, you can just issue waves and waves of DMCA takedowns, and they'll just kind of appear next to these different projects without too much issue. Again, it's more of a scattershot of DMCA takedown requests, and, well, GitHub at that time will most likely side with the party that is issuing the DMCA, unless there is some significant argument on the other side. So GitHub will probably be taking these down for the GitHub side, but if you look at any of these emulators that are currently active, they all seem to have their own self-hosted repository. So what I'm trying to say is they'll still be accessible. I guess it'll just be a little more difficult because it won't be as front-facing on like public GitHubs. But look, if you're already going online looking for these emulators and you're going through all the steps in order to make these emulators work, something tells me you can type them into Google and find some Reddit thread somewhere where they post the different links to the self-hosted side. All right, with that in mind though, clearly Nintendo is still very active pushing back against emulators, and I do think this is going to be something we'll be seeing for quite some time, and this is what Nintendo does, and we've seen it for a while. They'll make arguments, they will do all kinds of stuff behind the scenes to build a case, even going into some of these projects' discords to see what they're saying, log all of it for months, sometimes years, and then find one little thing they trip up on, and then they take it all down. That was a big thing that happened with Yuzu, and at this time, this is like something where they go, okay, we can DMCA blast these notices out, get them at least off of the public GitHub pages, and then maybe work from there. But Nintendo they're going to be dealing with this for a while because the Switch One, very clearly, while the system itself is winding down, Switch One software keeps selling, like hundreds of thousands of copies of things like Zelda Breath of the Wild in a quarter. So because the Switch One Breath of the Wild is something that is Switch 2 enhanced, they're going to be selling that version of the game, I mean, for basically the run of the Switch 2. So you will still have Switch 1 games on shelves probably long past when the Switch 1 stops selling, like years and years. And because of that, Nintendo will have this obligation to protect those games from things like emulation, along with third parties who they're going to work to protect as an obligation from people, pirating software. And Nintendo looks at emulation as something that, of course, enables that. That's one of the ways they were able to really take down different emulators like Yuzu. And it's more frustrating because while Nintendo does operate in the gray area with emulation, and we'll see it in the worst possible light, there are still many use cases as to why emulation should exist, especially when it comes to game preservation and, just accessing games that these companies don't want to sell or at all anymore, and you're left with, $100, $200, $300 copies of games that the secondhand market continues to just mark up constantly. So at that point, people are just going to go download that random PS2 game that's $500 for some reason. So with Nintendo, it's going to be a fight back and forth. But the way this is all going down, where a lot of this stuff's self-hosted anyway, while this is kind of a shot across the bow for all of this, it's not really something that's necessarily going to take all of this down, at least for now. But I will say Nintendo, very active in this space, so those communities should probably be very, very careful and vigilant around all this. Next up, let's talk about Sony and a new patent that was discovered that seems to target overwhelming game sizes. They are just getting bloated like crazy. It's very, very common to buy a game digitally and then look and it's like, oh, it's 80, it's 100 gigabytes, 120 gigabytes, and we don't even really bat an eye anymore. Think about that 10, 15 years ago. You go, what in the world? Now it's just, okay, I guess I'll let it download for a while. Well, there is an issue there because you don't get in the game immediately. It takes time, and if your internet connection is just so-so, it can take hours. Well, right now, Sony seems to be playing around with the idea of getting you into the game immediately through way of streaming assets. And this is kind of interesting. People are a little concerned around where this is going to take gaming, and okay, I kind of see where they're coming from, but I also can see it from a different perspective based on maybe how Sony could be using this. So let's take a look. This is over on Tech4Gamers, who initially spotted this patent, saying it discusses changing how games use storage. It aims to strike an ideal balance between local downloads and cloud hosting, reducing 100 gigabyte downloads to as small as 100 megabytes without latency penalties. Sony discusses streaming space-hungry texture and audio assets while a small launcher and critical core logic files are downloaded. This way, games can run locally without facing any latency. There would be no input lag or frame delays since technical files used during gameplay remain on the system. I mean, in fact, if you look at the patent, it does mention that the game won't wait for it won't hold up frames waiting for assets. So what would probably happen is if you're in the game and it's streaming assets in while you're playing and it doesn't deliver it on time, you're going to see a really like blocky or bland looking rock or texture on a wall or something. The PS1 door from Final Fantasy VII Remake as an example. It would look kind of like that. But the reason I look at this and go, this could be a good thing is, do you know how when you buy say a PlayStation 5 game digitally and you go to download it, or if you pop in a disc, and you see a little bar and then you see a larger bar, but the little bar is the ready to play bar. And when you get to a certain point, you can only start the game up. I do wonder if this is something that could work in that favor to where, yeah, you download 200 megabytes, so it's immediately ready to start and you can play the game. It'll stream in assets while it's downloading files behind the scenes. And then eventually there's a handoff and the whole game is just locally on your system. Because that's one of the things that I think myself and many have identified as a hurdle for Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft, really any of these companies, to overcome, because it does create this void of time where you just have to sit there and wait, and many people don't have maybe an hour or two to sit around and just wait and watch the little bar fill up. So they go, I'll check this out later or some other time. Or some people may look at that download size and go, I don't need it right now. Like, really, that is something to consider. So anything to remove the friction between buying the game and getting into it is very important to these different companies. And I do think very important to the customer with, again, how much larger these file sizes are getting, and I don't think they're going to be getting smaller anytime soon. And then we hear about all the issues around DRAM, solid-state storage, now spinning disk hard drives, having shortages, it seems, where a lot of those are selling out. We got to start figuring out ways to get around that, and yeah, maybe it comes down to streaming assets. Now, does that mean that you'll always have to be online? Yeah, probably, and that's the unfortunate aspect to this. But we see more and more people reliant on just digital games as it is, with physical media shrinking every single year. I'm telling you guys, the next step from digital game purchases is cloud streaming. That's just kind of how it is. So when we get to that point and I look around and go, we should have all bought physical, huh? There we go. But at least for now, I'm looking at this as more of a utility thing, but if it gets to a position where it's always online, even for single player games, it's not gonna be great. Next up, let's talk about a legendary figure in gaming. That's Hideki Sato, who was, pretty much the designer behind all of Sega's consoles, and that was a legendary run, especially in the 90s, but this would also go back to the arcade days. So we can see this over on VGC, where they say Hideki Sato has died at age 77. Sato and his R&D team were responsible for the creation of Sega's arcade and home console hardware, including the Master System, Genesis or Mega Drive, Sega Saturn, and Sega Dreamcast. The engineer joined Sega in 1971 and was the company's acting president between 2001 and 2003. He left the company in 2008. By the way, that's a very underrated part here that I don't think is noticed as much. Being the acting president between 2001 and 2003, that would have been a very difficult time, because that would have been when Sega was moving away from the console market and trying to figure out what to do post Dreamcast, right? Post hardware. They had been a console manufacturer up until that point. So being able to try to steer the ship from there, that's difficult. But it seems like Sega was able to figure it out after that, as we know Sega still is around now, and that's great. But think about that run, right, for Hideki Sato and his R&D team there, going from the arcade and working to bring the arcade into the living room with things like the Dreamcast especially, but going toe-to-toe with Nintendo, trying to deal with Sony when they show up with the PlayStation, and then I would say making the most, revolutionary console with the Dreamcast. Think about getting that system right at the end of the 90s, and it's going online. It has a keyboard you can get, Phantasy Star, you're playing with your friends, it has these incredible 3D graphics. I know, look, the Dreamcast still looks good to this day. I'm telling you, back when it first showed up on a CRT, It was like mind-blowing how that system looked and how some of the frame rates were, and the fact that those games, like fighting games, especially Marvel vs. Capcom 2 and others, were like right there with, like, it was almost arcade perfect for the living room. Soul Calibur, it's incredible stuff looking back on just how innovative, going from the Saturn to the Dreamcast, what kind of a leap that really was. And then you get into the VMU, the fact that the controller, the Dreamcast controller, used Hall effect sensors for the joystick, so they would try to avoid drifting that way. Something, by the way, that people are still calling for current controllers from Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft to use. So, I mean, just impressive stuff all the way around. I really wanted to put a spotlight here on Hideki Sato because of his contributions to SEGA gaming, but also on the hardware side, and a lot of the innovations that we enjoy now, even with our newer systems. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about some sales for the Switch, as well as other platforms. We'll take a look at this one first, though. I saw this making the rounds, and 10 Deal, as an example, has it posted where some of these Switch games are on sale right now at multiple different retailers. Amazon, Walmart, GameStop, VGP, PNP, they're all marked down. And it's worth pointing out, just because the joke obviously is Nintendo's games never go on sale. These are all physical new games. So you have Princess Peach's Showtime, Pikmin 4, Splatoon 3, Mario RPG, Xenoblade Chronicles X, which I'm waiting for that patch. Nintendo has to do some kind of Switch 2 edition or upgrade, free upgrade for that game, lift the frame rate. By the way, good pickup there though, and I would say it's worth getting in anticipation of that update, since we already saw the executable that mentioned 60 FPS, so I'm fully expecting it to happen, okay? Link's Awakening works really, really well there on the Switch 2, Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, and then Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe. Elsewhere, over on GameStop, I noticed that they do have pre-owned games, buy two, get the third free. And it also, while it does work on all newer titles as well that are used, so any Switch 2 used games, PS5, Xbox Series, it also works on retro games. And I was going through there and picking some out. We might do one of those GameStop retro grab bags to see how they do. I was looking at Vita games and PS3 games, because I've been really getting back into some of the PS3 stuff. I've been doing like custom firmware on some of these different systems that I have, and it's really cool. And the Vita itself, I've just been kind of going back down memory lane with some of those different games, but it's an expensive library to try to go through and collect. So when I see pre-owned games that buy two, get third free, let's get 3 Vita games and just grab one of them for $0. Just wanted to point all this out though, in case you were in the market for some new Switch titles, or you wanted to just rack up a bunch of used or new used games over on GameStop and save money. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, will Nintendo do anything this week for the Zelda 40th anniversary? 70% say no. The confidence is high right now for something Zelda related. Now, 30% yes. I just think right now it's tough, because clearly Nintendo has the blinders on for Mario. I mean, the Mario movie's coming up, Mario Day's right around the corner, and I think that's when they're going to do a 3D Mario announcement, and then one final push for the Mario movie. So it would get kind of busy, and then you have the Pokemon Day that's happening next week. That's the 30th anniversary, and it's Mario, it's Pokemon. Unfortunately for The Legend of Zelda, it's third fiddle at that point between them. So Nintendo looking at Mario, the Pokemon company looking at Pokemon. It's almost like there's just not enough room to have something big for The Legend of Zelda, other than, again, maybe some kind of post on social media. And then later this year, we'll probably have Nintendo do all kinds of stuff, because remember, they also have that Zelda movie happening next year in 2027. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Gold Pop-Tart, who says, I legit was at work at a game store, and there was an 8 to 10-year-old kid who came in and saw an X-Men figure and went, whoa, that's Wolverine from Fortnite. Lost a lot of faith that day. And look, that's the way it is now with kids. There's Roblox and Fortnite and Minecraft, and those are the things that are really, really popular right now in schools, where all the kids are talking about that, whereas back in the day, we didn't really have a lot of that. You had figures, as you mentioned, X-Men action figures. We knew them from X-Men. You had the different games on the Super Nintendo or the N64, the PS1, and so those are the games that kids were talking about back then, versus now, where they're all just kind of consumed by Fortnite and stuff. And the thing with that is there are so many collaborations that Epic seems to do with Fortnite. It's like constant. They're being introduced to a lot of these pop culture references or older series now, like you can say X-Men, to where, yes, they're going to relate it completely to Fortnite. That was the joke with Sora, but unfortunately, it's also kind of the reality. And ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed last week's Newswave, I'll leave it up here in a card. Or maybe you want to check out a recent breakthrough for the PlayStation 3 in the modding community, where even that super slim PS3 can be completely broken open and you can load custom firmware on it. I did an entire video showing off how that's done, and I'll leave right below. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.